I understand it's probably extremely embarrassing and frustrating if something this simple makes it through manufacturing. But what's more embarrassing is when companies handle it poorly. Fix it, make it right, I'm sure you will. Be public about it and say something. Why has it taken so long? Why does it take some brands so long to protect you from fire and death? We're gonna talk about this today. So we're talking about the ASUS Z690 Hero Recall. If you may or may not have noticed, there's now finally been an official recall filed with the Consumer Protection Commission here in the United States. So the problem is when you have something that can cause physical damage that leads to fire, there's an open exposure for that manufacturer to now cause a public safety concern. It's exactly what the Consumer Protection Commission does. There's a letter in there that I'm missing. I always forget. It's like the CPSC or something like that. But anyway, August 18th, there was an official recall filed. Now let's talk about the way the recalls work and why I'm saying ASUS, you need to do better. It's like, if you hadn't had the perfect example of how not to handle a fire-related recall, just look at the way NZXT handled the riser cables in the H1. That was a serious flub up on that one. It's been nearly 8 months since you guys even acknowledged that there was a problem with the Z690 motherboard. Back in December 27th, I put out a video of people showing on Reddit, and WCCF Tech covered it, and like PC Gamer and PC Mag, they all covered it, Z690 motherboards that had memory MOSFETs that were burning up. And what was discovered by me holding up my board and getting a close-up shot of it was the very same day BuildZoid took a look at the layout and said, hey, I believe this capacitor to be installed in reverse. And the problem is, remember, capacitors or diodes, I take that back, it's actually not a capacitor, I believe it's a diode, but it's a one-way flow valve for electricity. And the stripe is very important on which side of the flow it needs to go. It's like having a one-way flapper door, right? If you need something to go this way, you can't have the door shutting, you have to have the door opening that way. Well, when it's installed in reverse, it can cause serious issues, obviously, with voltage leaks, voltage increases, and eventually leading to burn-ups and fire. So BuildZoid had discovered the problem like that, because BuildZoid is a freaking genius when it comes to like board layouts and circuit design, and just listening to that guy talk, you can tell he knows his stuff. And for him to discover what the problem was by looking at a still frame of my video, and it still took ASUS time to respond to that, their initial response at the time was, we have identified a small number of boards. Remember, this is December, guys, December of 2021. They said they discovered a small number of boards that were affected by a diode that was installed improperly, which was upside down and backwards, as we've already shown. Now, we showed our board was actually installed correctly. The writing was the right way, and the stripe, I believe, was on the right side. I can't remember. Here's what they look like, incorrect and correct. And I kept my board, and it's actually in my system because I know there's no issue with everything installed properly. Apparently, in the last 8 months, there had to have been a lot more reports and or RMAs coming in of boards that were either failing or due to the active RMA, it wasn't an official recall. Remember, to be an official recall, it has to be submitted to the Consumer Protection Commission. And that's where it becomes an active recall campaign, where somebody can go and look, does this product have a recall? And the website will tell you, here's how you go about the recall, here's the official registration of the recall, here's the company information, and the company will have no choice but to take it back. This happens in all manners of industry. Automotive, food, you probably hear it most in food. That's obviously a direct public health concern when it involves ingestibles. Something had to have happened in the last 8 months, and I don't know if it's more board failures, potential fires and or actual fires, or just the number of boards that were finally making their way back was exceeding the numbers they expected it to be. Now, basically, ASUS had said publicly a few days after our video that they had acknowledged, like I said, there was a product range, like a serial number range that was affected. And we had speculated that, and we even had some people that work specifically in like the build plants of some of these electronics not necessarily these motherboards, but they build in like these pick and place machine robots, and they know. And I said, don't these diodes get loaded like a cartridge? And aren't there fail safes in there where cameras are supposed to be checking everything as it goes? And then there's like a giant 3D image. It takes a snapshot of the board to make sure this kind of stuff doesn't happen. And basically this person said like 3 different fail safe systems had to have either been disabled or not working for this to have happened. And that this does not just accidentally happen. This is actually a major issue where corners were cut to increase production. Remember, this was all in the middle of like the worst time to try and buy electronics because of the chip shortage, and the manufacturing couldn't keep up. So I speculated that companies and manufacturers were cutting corners with QC and QA to try and meet the demand, and this is what happens. Well, now they're recalling 10,000 of these boards. And I don't know if and that's obvious, I believe just the United States, because this commission that we're talking about, the Public Safety Commission, and the Consumer Safety Commission, is just a United States entity. The problem here is, why did it take 8 months? That was 8 months of potential disaster and tragedy. I am really hoping nobody watching this video has had a house fire or an apartment fire or an office fire because a system was left on. Like, we put our systems to sleep. There's still power running through memory when it's in sleep. Remember, that diode is specifically related to the memory MOSFETs on that board, where the way it's laid out. So voltage is flowing through the memory, and if you get a little bit of a melt happening and it continues having voltage go through it, it turns into a fire, and the next thing you know, all the combustibles in your room explode and you have a full alarm fire. It has happened. And it was speculated to have happened with the NZXT H1 riser cable problem. And anytime that happens, you seriously have people's lives in your hand. So my biggest issue here is the fact that it took ASUS this long to file an official recall. Now, obviously, because of legal reasons, and you know lawyers are involved in this, because it is companies and lawyers, and I'm not just speaking about ASUS, I mean in general. The problem with large companies and corporations like this is they do an assessment. There's no doubt about it, they do an assessment. What is our legal exposure? Are we exposed right now to more liability than the cost to repair this is? And they don't do anything about it usually until that exposure potential exceeds the cost of recall. If the exposure is lower, then if you're just a bean counter, oh, okay, fine, we'll deal with that as it happens, but we're not gonna do a mass recall because that will cost us more. So clearly something's happened. And what's happened is the exposure has exceeded the cost of the recall. And so I'm hoping that means something didn't happen somewhere in the world. That means now we are talking about a very tragic situation where there's either loss of health, injury, or life. And I really hope that's not the case. But it just still continues to surprise me that companies in 2022 are still dragging their feet when it comes to an issue like this. Like it took like the full brunt of Gamers Nexus going on like the most aggressive campaign you can possibly do as an influencer to get that campaign pushed through the Consumer Protection Commission to get it turned into an official recall. Because here's the thing, the way these recalls work is basically threefold. The company can file it themselves. The company can be proactive, reach out and say, here's the product range, here's the issue with the product, here's the potential, here's why we're recalling, here's how many units we're recalling, and here's the recalling procedure. So that there is a logged, known problem with the product with the United States Consumer Protection Commission that then says, this is what the company is doing about it. So basically it's kind of like a legal bubble for both sides. ASUS can say, hey, we recalled this. If you didn't participate, that's kind of on you. But the person can also say, hey, I'm having this issue, you have to take it back because of the recall. So it's like a protective container for both parties. Enough people could complain about it to where if the company is not doing anything about it, if enough people complain to the Consumer Protection Commission, they can then launch an investigation and then they can force a recall. The other thing that could happen is if there's a serious public safety concern. Let's say there's a specific Romex cable that was used in like an entire skyscraper or something that's known to have insulation issues and can cause fires. Or bad concrete used in footers in skyscrapers that can make the building come falling down. These are things that like, hey, the commission's gonna get involved themselves and they're gonna force not only just like a product recall, and I use kind of an extreme situation there, but okay, let's say the Firestone tire blowout in the Ford Explorers back in like the 90s. because it was a wrong rated tire and they were blowing out and flipping over all over the place. The NTSB, they got involved, obviously forced a recall, and they had no choice, right? The Ford had to deal with it, and so did Firestone. But again, it's just sad because I left that going, all right, ASUS is handling it. ASUS knows. We put out some photos that said, hey, if your board has the diode in this direction, you're more than likely safe. I've continued using mine, no issues. If your diode is upside down, unplug your system, turn it off, contact ASUS. The problem is, I did have some follow-ups after that video where some folks were telling me, hey, my serial number's not within that range, but I have a clear photo here of it upside down. And ASUS doesn't want to do anything about it. And at that point, my only suggestion is like, look, you need to lean on them hard, send them photos and say, here's physical evidence that it's installed wrong, which is also evidence that the brand needs to say, hey, our serial number range that we're using is also incorrect. So I'm hoping that's kind of what happened, is that more people were submitting RMA requests that didn't fall in that range and there was still proof that they were upside down. But with as much time that has passed, I'm really starting, because I believe ASUS even kind of stopped selling the Z690 Hero for the longest time. Like, I think they stopped selling it because of that. So it has to mean that the majority or enough of them had a problem out in the wild to where they ended up doing this recall. So it's either boards were actually physically burning up still, their serial number range was wrong, or they were forced to do it by the commission. Now, it sounds more to me like ASUS filed this recall campaign, not the other way around. I could be wrong, but here's the thing. Lawyers are involved at this point because of that legal exposure I talked about, and ASUS is obviously going to be very mum onto the details of what forced the recall. We know why there's a recall. We knew why almost 9 months ago, 8 months ago. But it's another situation where unfortunately the brand and its lawyers and whoever else makes these decisions decided that 8 months of potential tragedy was worth it. And that's why ASUS, you got to do better than this. The public expects better from you, we expect better from you, and the issue here of putting, waiting this long to make it known, because part of the recall too is they have to contact every known distributor, every known supplier, every known retailer, and every known purchaser if there's a link to this. Because the problem is you go to Micro Center and you buy this board, Micro Center's not keeping a customer list of everyone that bought them. It's up to you to kind of somehow know, right? With automotive, it's different. You have a registered owner of a vehicle and they can send it to you. But it's kind of up to you to kind of pay attention and know. But again, 8 months later, they just filed it on the 18th. It's unlikely that anyone even knows until these videos go live. So I'm not the first one to do this video, I won't be the last. There's a lot of written publication that have talked about it. If you're using the Z690 Hero board, I would probably, even if it's installed the right way, because it's an official recall now, just to protect yourself, contact ASUS and RMA it. I'm very, 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 and it sounds like a dad thing. I'm so disappointed in you. I'm not mad, I'm disappointed. No, I'm actually kind of mad too, because we talked about this 8 months ago. We talked about it, BuildZoid talked about it, Gamers Nexus talked about it. A lot of publications talked about it. This should not have taken this long, and you should not be taking people's safety lightly, and especially with 8 months worth of dragging your feet worth of lightning. I know you can't even say it takes that long to file a claim or to file a recall campaign, because we saw how fast NZXT was able to pivot once the pressure was on them. So ASUS, you've got some trust to start rebuilding. Trust me, it's not going to be an easy one, but it's now on you to fix the public trust issue that has now been broken. We'll be keeping an eye on it to make sure you guys are following up on all this and making it all right. It takes more than just a recall. You have to follow up and follow through on your recall efforts and make it right for all 10,000 boards that were sold. All right, guys, thanks for watching. A little public safety announcement here. See you in the next one.